So with my absence last week and with Brad's absence this week, it is officially official. Kelly, you are the stalwart of the Talkin Pop Podcast. You are the mainstay. You're the constant.
I mean, it's becoming more and more apparent to me that I need to take a vacation. Everyone else is taking a vacation, and I'm hanging out here holding down the fort. Well, actually, last week I was there. Now I'm here.
Yes. But
nonetheless,
regardless, when people tune in each week, they know that they're going to see you and get your takes.
Well, I'm glad that I can provide that reassurance to our listeners.
It's a big deal. When most people watch this, it will be December the 1st.
Yes.
It's a big deal. I wish I had a bell or an alarm or something we can ring. It's officially Spider-Man month. Not just on our podcast, I'm sure on every other movie and superhero podcast. It is Spider-Man month. Tickets officially went on sale yesterday, Spider Monday. I don't know about you. I had a whale of a time trying to get them. The Cineplex website here in Canada crashed. I saw the same sort of thing happening in the US. I crawled my way to some tickets for opening weekend. I have them. I'm going to see this movie. There was also a little bit of a mishap going around on social, on TikTok of the Cineplex website
and the cast listing.
Yeah. Do you think? Can I ask you something? Do you think that's got to be on purpose? Like, I don't believe that someone like unknowingly just put the names in there.
I mean, either way, like, it's confirming the inevitable. It's confirming what we all already know. I think for people like us, we're not surprised, but kind of giggling. And then for people like your average moviegoer, they're not paying attention anyways. So while it was funny and I saw it going around the internet, it wasn't a groundbreaking discovery for me.
No.
I also have my tickets. I'm not super happy with the seats that I got, but that just shows you how hot this movie is. It is literally a hot ticket.
It has officially sold more pre-sale tickets than Avengers Endgame.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's the power of the universes coming together. I don't know if this is just, maybe it's a bit of everything. The power of the universes coming together, and then the three Spideys, the power of COVID-19 and having not been to the theater in so long, and this being the real first big cinematic event. There have been movies in the theater. This is a cinematic event, and it's been a hot minute since we've had one of those. I think everybody's just so stoked out of their minds.
I've been saying for weeks that I think this is the movie that is going to end, like, everyone's sort of scared to go to the theater.
Yeah.
Due to COVID, I think this is going to be the one that blows the doors open, and it's looking that way. And some more exciting news. Yesterday, it was officially confirmed by Amy Pascal from Sony that we are getting not one, not two, three, an entirely new Tom Holland Spider-Man Trilogy produced by Marvel.
Yeah.
Obviously these are Sony movies, but Marvel is a producer, so he is staying within the MCU. Before we get into sort of speculating what those movies are going to be, my hot take is she announced 3 movies that will be produced by Marvel and Sony, but it's more than 3 movies. Like, there's no way that he's not going to be a main character in whatever the next Avengers project is too.
Yeah, I was of two minds of this announcement, right? Because if you roll back the tape a few weeks ago when we were reacting to the big trailer that dropped, I sort of speculated that based on some comments that were made by Tom Holland and just based on the way that they were like ramping up to this movie, that maybe we were seeing a closing of the curtain on Tom Holland, at least in the MCU, and, turning of the tide in terms of his involvement with Sony and, that rogues gallery of movies that they're building over there. Then even on top of that, like a comment that that wasn't even out yet when we did that episode was Tom Holland saying something to the effect of, if I'm playing Spider-Man, by the time I'm 30, I'm doing something. So I was really like,
do you think that was a misdirect?
Yes. Yeah. Now with all this, yes, I certainly do. Like, I think, like on one hand, I'm not surprised. Of course, this makes money. The Sony Marvel partnership is working in terms of producing pretty good content while also raking in dollars. So yeah, like it's I'm happy about this news. You said it yourself, Rob, like when Kevin Feige's in the conversation as it relates to Spider-Man, things are looking good. So I was really happy to hear this. I still think you're right. He's still going to play in like Sonyville, like maybe a little removed from the MCU, which I'm not as excited about. But yeah, this kid, he's hit the jackpot in terms of having a job now for the next 10 years at least.
I'd really like to know if this was the plan all along, or if maybe the buzz and just like the crazy excitement, like this thing is outsold Avengers.
It's massive.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm wondering if now they're looking at this going, we can't break this up. Like, we have to stay together. This character, when coupled with the MCU, and I know there's a lot of excitement for Toby and like sort of dipping in Andrew and dipping back into those old Spider-Man movies that don't really have anything to do with the MCU, but
yeah,
him being associated with the MCU just takes his character to a different level. And I just like, I'm sorry, I will die on this hill. If you look at the first wave of Avengers movies, that team is really built around like Iron Man and Captain America. Like, yes, you have Thor, Black Widow, Hawkeye, whatever. So if I look at the next generation of Avengers, Spider-Man is one of the chief among them.
And are you referring to the young Avengers possibly?
Yeah, maybe, possibly. That's rumored.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw, there was that clip of Haley Steinfeld. She was in an interview and somebody, a member of the media posed that question to her, and she just turned and looked back at Feige. Was like, and he was just like looking at her too, like being like, play it cool. So that, like, that's coming again. That's not anything we didn't expect, but it's always fun to kind of have those moments where we catch them in the interviews, kind of revealing things. And then to your comment about like whether this was sort of baked already or if this is kind of as a result of the buzz, I mean, who can say? But I think, we've been pretty critical on this podcast about Sony and the type of quality that they put out in their movies. But one thing we've been consistent about is that Sony is motivated by money, as most companies are. But like, so yeah, like when you're outpacing one of the biggest movies of all time, the second largest movie of all time, it's a sensible business decision. Forget the politics around who owns what. It's a sensible business decision. So and it works out for us fans. So I'm stoked.
So I want to talk about just quickly about like there's things that we know we're going to get in this next set of movies, but I also want to each sort of give something that we'd like to see heading into this next set of movies. So I think it's completely obvious that we're getting the crossover with Venom. Like, that is happening. We saw it at the end of Let There Be Carnage. We've talked about it a ton ever since. I think right out of the gate in this sort of second trilogy, that's what the storyline's going to be. I still am banking on a post-credit scene at the end of No Way Home that includes Venom in it. Like, I think that is where we're going right out of the gate. Whether that lasts one movie, two movies, maybe they're doing sort of like, we're getting the Sinister Six in No Way Home, but we're also building up this other Sinister Six and Sony with like Morbius and Vulture. And so like, I could see something like that happening, but I think it's a given that right out of the gate in this next trilogy, it's Spider-Man, it's Venom, and what version of that story? Because traditionally in that story, the symbiote starts on Peter, and then and he gets the black Spider-Man suit.
Yeah.
Which I hope we get in that Venom movie. God, I hope we get it in the Venom movie. That will get me excited, because you and I specifically have talked a lot about how this Tom Hardy version of Venom is just not for us. But if we get a trailer for that down the line and I see Tom Holland in the symbiote suit, I'll be like, nice. Yeah. So it traditionally starts with Peter, then makes its way to Eddie Brock, and he becomes Venom after that. But now he's already Venom,
and he's like this anti-hero.
Yeah.
Like he's saving the world. So it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard. Yeah. I mean, you were asking the question of what I want to see. Quite frankly, what I don't want to see is that version of Venom. I'm gonna have to just get used to it, because that is what's gonna happen. Like there's no way, but it doesn't excite me. What would excite me and what I would like to see is, so far, by design of the MCU and by design of Spider-Man coming in so late in the game, right? Like you already had your Avengers well-formed, a couple of movies under the belt. So far, every Spider-Man movie has been very tied to other, like, you've got Iron Man in the first one. In the second one, you've got, Nick Fury. You've got all these different characters. Now in the third one, we're getting Doctor Strange. I was actually just watching, because I knew what we were going to be talking about today. I was just watching Spider-Man 2. And I just kept kind of thinking, like, I like that this story is just about Peter Parker. I like that it's just about Spider-Man. So I'm hoping with, all of these different villains, whether it's, whatever the Sinister Six ends up looking like, what, the makeup of it, the different characters that we're going to bring into that. I want to see Spider-Man kind of be on his own for a bit. Like, he is the keystone flagship character.
Yeah, he is.
Let's let him do his own thing. And also, I'm excited to see him get out of high school, which I know that fans were clamoring for this. So I'm happy that they did it, and that they gave us teenage Peter Parker. But I think in order to go up against a villain like Venom, we gotta mature him up a little bit. And if you're gonna go into a place where you're pairing him up against a villain that's been, like, I don't know if those movies were rated R, and if they weren't, rated R was certainly in the conversation.
Yeah.
Like it tonally, we have to sort of mature him up a little bit to be able to actually really take on Venom in a meaningful way. So that's what when I think about 3 movies, I think those are the opportunities that lie ahead. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think we were going to have the space to get there. And now we do. So I'm like, all right.
You think we need to get away from going and buying MJ a black dahlia necklace?
I mean, he could still go out and buy her nice jewelry. I just think, I'd like him to not have to call Aunt May if he wants to cross the street, right? Yeah. Like I want to see him. I want to see Peter Parker, need a little cash in his pocket. So he pulls out his camera and gets a job at the newspaper. Like, that's what I want to start seeing.
Yeah.
And I'm ready to see that now, because they gave us high school Peter. I'm 100%. Happy they didn't start there. I think this was like, fans were dying for this. But now we've done it. Now, like, technically, if we even like count the years, like, he should be graduating high school. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm with you. For me, it's I know that we're getting Venom. So I would like to see sort of a curve back, like I said earlier, to sort of the traditional Venom storyline. And I'd like to see them dip into some villains we haven't seen before. I'm not going to say which villains, because we have the inaugural Talkin Pop Top 5 coming up.
Yes.
But Spider-Man has this incredible rogues gallery, and we've really only scratched the surface of it. Mm-hmm. Like, we really have. So I would like to see them delve into some new villains.
Yeah.
And get away from what we've seen before. So without further ado, because I said earlier, this is a big month. This is Spider-Man month. What better way to kick it off? When we started doing this show, we would, you, myself, and Brad were ideating about what are we going to do? And one of the things that we talked about is doing top fives. And because we started the show at such a busy time for movie news, we really haven't had a chance to do one yet. No. And so this is perfect with No Way Home on the horizon. We're going to do the first ever Talkin Pop top 5. And we're going to list our top 5 favorite Spider-Man villains.
Sure are.
When you look at comic book superheroes, there are 2 heroes that stand above the rest, when it comes to epic rogues gallery.
Yeah.
And it's Spider-Man, and it took me about 20 or so minutes, and it's Batman, my first Batman reference of the day.
There we go.
So without further ado, let's start at number 5. Kelly, we're going to start with you. Who is number 5 on your list?
Before we jump into that, I do actually just want to say, when you're asking me that question, we did not exchange lists.
No, we know.
So we are authentically
reacting to each
other's lists. And yes, I have notes on my phone. If you see me referring down here, folks watching us on YouTube. So actually number 5, I would say, was my hardest spot to fill. I think I got my top 4 pretty quick, and it was just kind of, figuring out where they landed. Top 5, I kept swapping people in and out. So we may have to circle back to some honorable mentions at the end if we may.
Agreed.
But I landed that my number 5 Spider-Man villain is the Lizard.
Okay. Nice. Dr. Kurt Connors.
Yes, Dr. Connors. And the reason why I chose him, so, my list is really based on a combination of factors and a combination of different media. While I certainly have a high level understanding of some things that have happened in the comics, that's not a medium that I've consumed too much Spider-Man content. So really, what's made up my opinion here are the movies that we've seen, as well as, we're aging ourselves here, but that 90s animated series is a real, it really informs my list.
100%. It informed mine too. It informs, if you're from our era, that is your like point of reference.
Yeah.
Always for anything Spider-Man.
And just epic theme song. So the reason why I chose the Lizard, one is I just had very visceral memories of those episodes.
Yeah.
And also, and if we're going to keep, we love mentioning Batman on this podcast. He's kind of like Spider-Man's Mr. Freeze.
Yes.
In a sense where, there's, in this case, it's himself, as opposed to his wife or loved one. He tries to cure his amputated arm, and all goes awry, and and then we have this villain, and he's a tough enemy for Spider-Man because we know at his core he's good.
Yes.
It's Jekyll and Hyde. And he can't control himself. And so Spider-Man, especially when we think about him as being a young kid, and the importance of fatherly or male figures in his life with the loss of Uncle Ben, Dr. Connors, it's like
a mentor.
Exactly. And it's such a heart-wrenching dynamic that this person who he's got this mentor-mentee relationship with, and who he respects for, his scientific mind, as well as being a nice guy, he also has to protect people from him and fight him. And in certain iterations of that character, not so much in the version we got in Amazing Spider-Man 2, or sorry, Amazing Spider-Man, the first one, he's can be vicious. Yes. he's a menacing character. So that's why he landed at number 5 for me. I just thought I liked the sort of conflict of that character.
It's a great storyline.
It's a great storyline. It's great. So he's my number 5.
So number 5 for me, I gotta tell you, I was making my list and I'm looking at the top 4 and I'm like, these are pretty obvious choices. So I wanted to go off the board for my number 5.
Oh no.
And I just wanted to just say, like, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna say it. I'm gonna go with Herman Schultz, aka Shocker.
Okay.
I love Shocker. I've always loved Shocker. I love his outfit. He just has a badass outfit. He's a badass looking villain. This is purely based on optics.
His yellow quilt outfit.
Shocker traditionally hasn't been like, he's not on the level of some of the other top tier villains, but he's like a mainstay in Spider-Man comics, also in the various animated series. I was disappointed when they cast him in Homecoming and he never really had the proper suit on.
And they kind of had like 2 of him, right? Like they had the one guy, I don't know the actor's name. I know that he played Trey in the OC.
In the OC, yes.
So he was kind of it, and then he gets killed, and then it's the other guy who steps in. So it's like, yeah, they never fully realized that character in the movies.
He was just sort of a throwaway henchman.
Yeah. But I certainly remember him from the 90s series and his yellow quilted outfit.
I just love his outfit. I've always thought he's just a badass looking villain. And I love, like, when I was looking, putting my list together, I'm like Googling Shocker, and you just go to images, and there's so many great images from the comics of just the 2 of them, like, looking at each other. He's also a great villain in the Spider-Man PlayStation game, in the first one.
Yeah.
I just love the way that character looks. Like, plain and simple, I love the way that character looks. And so Shocker.
This was an aesthetic decision for you.
This was yes. The rest of them, I will dive deep into storylines and what have you, but I've always had a bit of a thing for Shocker, and so I wanted to put him as number 5 on my list.
Yeah, fair enough. Spoiler alert, he did not make my list.
Yes,
so we will not be revisiting we will not be revisiting conversation on Shocker in my next
I didn't think he would make your list. All right, number 4.
So number 4, I think some people will think that this is criminally low, but I don't think you'll be surprised at where I put it. So my number 4 villain is Venom.
Yep.
And the reason why, like, if you look at a lot of different lists and talking about rogues, he's usually in the top 2.
Yeah.
The reason why he's number 4 for me is because of our movie experience with him so far. Like and I don't know if it's just that people haven't got it right yet, or maybe are we learning that this is a really hard character to translate to film in a believable way, right?
Yeah.
I'm with you, like, origin story is cool. The dynamic with Peter is very cool. He's a character that originated in the 80s, and like his whole aesthetic just oozes, pun intended there, 80s. Like, there's a bit of aesthetics in my decision here too. Like, Venom is a very cool looking character. And then, by extension, like, there's so much related to him, like with Carnage and things like that. So like, there's no denying that he has been such an important villain. Where I continue to be underwhelmed is in these movie iterations where we just can't, Spider-Man 3, that movie's chock full of problems that's a whole other episode, but we didn't get the right.
He was kind of shoehorned in.
Yeah, and it was goofy, and it was.
Yeah, that's you're right. That's a whole other conversation. So Venom is my number 4 as well.
Okay.
And I'm here and I'm with you, where it's like, it surprised me where I ranked him, but then when I sat back and thought about it, I was like, do I like the character or do I like the story arc?
Right.
And I like the story arc. I touched on it earlier, saying like what I want to see and how we're going to get the Venom crossover. And I want the symbiote on Peter. And the story starts with it on Peter, and then it transitions to Eddie Brock, and he and Eddie have this sort of weird relationship already. And then so that kind of like, they have like a pre-established relationship.
Yeah.
And to your point, part of the reason why Venom didn't work in Spider-Man 3 is because Sam Raimi, if you look at his depiction his Spider-Man movies, they're very influenced by like the early comics. Like they're very influenced by like early Spider-Man comics. And what, as you said earlier, Venom didn't come around till the 80s.
Yeah.
So you've got Sony being like, put Venom in the movie, and you've got Sam Raimi who's like, this Venom doesn't really fit with like my version of Peter Parker and Spider-Man.
And this uber, like, again, I was just watching one of the movies, this uber camp world. Like it's so, like, those movies are great. So when I say this, I'm not saying it to be negative, but those movies are so campy. Like they're so, it's like, it's a complete, you could believe that it was the same universe as Christopher Reeve's Superman. Like it's that level of camp. So that's where, like, tonally, you're right. It like just didn't work. And then add in that, you know, you're never going to get a great product when the person who's creating the movie actually is like disinterested in what they're doing. Like he was disinterested in having that character in, and it showed. And then, you know, and then roll back the tape, folks. Tom Hardy, it's not Tom Hardy's fault. He's doing what he's supposed to do. And I think he's doing as much as he can, but it's so goofy. It's so, like, they're trying to have it rated R, but then it's like zing one-liner. It's so bad. I have nothing positive to say about those movies.
Do you know, we've talked a little bit, like, I don't want to go down a Venom train here, but just quickly.
Yeah.
You know, we talked a little bit about I think the issue with Venom, I think you hit it perfectly on the head a few minutes ago. I think people are having a really hard time sort of putting this sort of outrageous alien character like in a real world setting. And so that's why I think you double down with the comedy a little bit. Whereas, like, I'm of the opinion, like, you need to go the Spawn route and just accept this for what it is. And stop worrying about get it? He's an alien. Like, stop worrying about doing that and just double down on it. And that's just, they're really struggling to do that.
Well, my God, like, that also just, like, we're a little late in the game now because there's already 2 of these silly movies from Sony, but my God, like, we're in the moment in the MCU where anything is possible from any planet. We had in Eternals them going up and talking to a massive celestial. Like, anything is possible right now. I honestly don't think the concept of, you know, anything alien is going to read silly anymore. I think, to your point, like, I think what's reading silly is them trying to justify it. And it's like, just do it, guys. Like, just do it. And I also think, and this will be interesting to see how it plays out, I think another reason why Venom's a little lower on my list is, and you kind of said it when you're like, do I like the character? It's like, he's kind of a meathead. Like, you know what I mean? And so I'm actually not sure that and part of the reason why they're maybe having trouble is, like, it's hard for him to carry his own story and his own movie and his own, like, I kind of see him as like sort of like, I would love to see him as like sort of an appendage, like, you know, there's a villain that we kind of have some emotional attachment to, and then maybe Venom's there and we don't spend as much time listening to him, blah, blah, blah. Like it. So I think I don't find the emotional resonance as much with that character, but it's undeniable his impact as, you know, one of the big villains in the Spider-Man Rogues Gallery.
100%. All right, number 3.
Number 3, this is where I think we start getting into, I think you and I are gonna have the same top 3 if I'm telekinetic, but it's where did they land? So number 3 for me is Doc Ock.
Okay.
And the reason, well, he's only number 3.
Just so you know, Doc Ock is not on my list.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So Doc Ock is on my list because I just think that his impact in the spider world is immeasurable. Like, he's the founder of the Sinister Six.
Yep.
He is someone who can match wits with Peter Parker. He's got a really compelling emotional story. In Spider-Man 2, they really dive into sort of him being, it's kind of similar to the Lizard, where it's like good guy gone bad.
In the PlayStation video game, they do the same thing where he has a relationship with Octavius before the arms sort of take over.
Yeah. And then in other cases, he's just, a really smart man who starts to, get a little fed up with people not recognizing his genius.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I just think, the character design is very cool. I think, in Spider-Man 2, it's that similar thing where it's like there's a mentor-mentee thing. There's mutual respect there.
Yeah.
But he's just gone mad, and then you can see, like, we haven't seen the movie yet, but in No Way Home, like, you can see that he's going to be complex. Like, it looks like he's going to be actually a good guy, possibly,
because when he died, apparently they're all coming back, and this isn't a spoiler. Like, this is well known. Like, they're all sort of coming back at their point of their death in their original movie, and he had sort of fought back against the arms and plunged his machine into the river or whatever. So that's why I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's going to sort of be the genesis of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, and so interestingly enough, I talked about how the Lizard, for me, like, part of the reason why he was on my list was because of his depiction in the animated series. I actually remember, and I've, thinking back to being a kid, Doc Ock was actually, I was never excited about Doc Ock in the animated series. To me,
the Lloyd Christmas haircut just
I'm not gonna lie. So when I was writing my reasons here, I also wrote great bowl cut.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll put that in the pros column. But all of the other iterations of this character in the movies, and that's, Spider-Man 2, Into the Spider-Verse, where we do a gender swap.
Yeah.
And then also, I didn't play those games super closely, but I've seen a couple of the cutscenes and things like that. So all of those tellings of the character is why he's landed at number 3. I think it's a really conflicted, interesting character, a match of brains. And then, with the mechanical arms, you get the brawn, but he's still, like, physically an ordinary man.
Yeah. In the PlayStation game, he almost has like a bit of a penguin look to him.
Yes, for sure. So I'm really excited to see him return in No Way Home. I think Alfred Molina is
fantastic.
It's just so fantastic. Great. So that's my number 3.
So by not selecting Doc Ock, in no way am I downplaying his significance to the Spider-Man lore. Like, in no way am I doing that. He is one of the OGs.
Yeah.
He's arguably Spider-Man's greatest nemesis, arguably. But I constructed my list, as you did too, based on like the characters that resonated the most with me during like my life at like following sort of the Spider-Man universe.
Yeah.
So my number 3 is another one who could be considered Spider-Man's arch nemesis, and that is the Green Goblin.
Okay.
Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin. Like, it goes without saying. First of all, the Goblin character is fantastic. Like, it has like it has a bit of a Joker tendency to it. The glider, the pumpkins, the fact that it's Norman Osborn, then it becomes Harry Osborn, and just like the association to Peter, how Norman's like a father figure to him, and Harry's his best friend, and then they end up becoming lifelong nemesis, and it's a fantastic character. I love the aesthetic. It's so funny when you look back at Spider-Man 1.
Yeah.
For years, I made fun of that suit. For years, I was like, that literally looks like a Power Ranger villain.
Yeah.
It looks terrible. Now I look at it and I'm like, this is fantastic.
It's great.
I love the way this looks. It's awesome.
It's great.
And I like that they're incorporating some of the purple elements. We talked about this on our No Way Home episode. Again, Google Green Goblin. There are some stunning images of him from graphic novels, from comic books over the years. He is like, I love that character. I will always up when it's a Spider-Man Green Goblin story.
So you've really buried the lead here, because Green Goblin is my number one.
Okay.
So I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but just for the sake of not repeating ourselves, I'll reveal that now. So Green Goblin was my number one.
Yeah.
And the reason why he ended up being at number one for me is because, synonymous with Spider-Man is the concept of with great power comes great responsibility.
Yes.
And I think Green Goblin, Norman Osborn, by extension, Harry Osborn, is the antithesis to that.
Yeah.
These are people who have great power, like with their wealth, and then eventually, with their sort of supernatural powers from, the accent and things like that. And they don't manage it responsibly. Mm-hmm. So it's that perfect yin yang to Spider-Man. Also, goes without saying the family dynamic that like Harry and Peter are friends, and then you've got Norman. Like there's so much connection there.
Complication, like MJ is involved in that too.
Yeah, exactly. And like that, and like you saw it in that original trilogy, like that, while there was a peppering in of other villains and storylines, like that was a thorough through because of how strong and compelling that storyline is. Goes without saying, and I'm so excited to see him again, that Willem Dafoe just chews the scenery as that character. So
he's going to be fantastic.
That plays into my selection here as well. He's sadistic, he's scary. He's also got that Jekyll Hyde thing, like almost like, again, we got to tie everything back to Batman. He's got a little bit of the
it's a natural comparison. These are natural comparisons.
It is. Everybody loves a pumpkin bomb. So, that too. And then to me, I was kind of fighting between my number one and number two. I won't reveal what my number two is, but the thing that put it over the edge for me was that in those comics, and one of the most iconic images is Green Goblin killed Gwen Stacy.
Yes.
And that to me was like, that's a villain, man. That's a villain. One of the most iconic, impactful things aside from Uncle Ben was at the hands of the Green Goblin. So that is what put me over. So burying the lead, but that is my number one.
Do we want to talk about Dane DeHaan?
You know what? I sort of choose to put him out of my mind. Not again, like it's so interesting. We talk about so many of these movies, and I think a consistent theme that comes out is it's less about the actors themselves, right? Like I don't think it's just I didn't like the character design on it. Like he looked like from the Leprechaun. Like it looked terrible. And then I personally like seeing Norman Osborn as the Green Goblin, at least first. And so the fact that they sort of leapfrogged over that, like that character was in the movie, but he was on his deathbed.
Yeah. It sets it up better for when Harry takes up the mantle, if you have Norman preceding him. Yeah. So I'm with you 100%. All right. Number two.
So my number two then, to round out my list, is the Kingpin / Wilson Fisk.
That is also my number two.
So, obviously in more recent years, he's been more of a daredevil villain. But like, come on, he originated with Spidey. He's the main baddie in Into the Spider-Verse. Mm-hmm. And, in past episodes and in episodes that will come, folks will get to know that I love like the street level, grounded villains.
Can I say something quickly about Kingpin?
Sure.
We've constantly made comparisons to Batman villains, and with like, you could say this character reminds me of this character reminds me of that. The Batman world is all about like crime in Gotham City and the mob and whatever.
Yeah.
However, Carmine Falcone or Sal Maroni or whatever can't even carry the Kingpin's lunch. Like, it's when it comes to like lead gangster mob boss villains, it's not even
it's
close.
not even a contest. It's not even a contest. So yeah, and you know what, like I think as I look at my list, maybe with the exception of Venom, a consistent theme throughout the rest of them is that there's sort of a match of wits against Spider-Man. And while I don't think Wilson Fisk is a slouch in terms of his his knowledge and his smarts, he's also just like a physically imposing force. He's a big dude. Like I have such visceral like memories of scenes in the animated series where they've got this big, very square shaped dude picking up Spider-Man and just squeezing the life out of him. Like, so like I love more grounded street level villains. And then it goes without saying that Vincent D'Onofrio's
oh my god, outstanding
portrayal of him in the Daredevil series is one of my, if we ever did an episode where we just counted down our favorite villains in in television and media, he'd be in my top 5. Like he is so incredible in that role. I have my fingers crossed. There are tons of rumors going around the internet that we're gonna see him again.
You can't just get like it's kind of the reason why Charlie Cox has shown up in No Way Home. You can't just it's so good. You can't just get rid of it. This
is what I love about the MCU.
If it ain't broke.
Exactly. This is what they started. I want to say like J.K. Simmons was the first one, but maybe there was one before that. It's like, let's not waste perfect casting.
Yes.
Perfect casting.
Yeah.
So
shout out though. Here's what I want to say. The Daredevil movie from the early 2000s has it's ripe with issues, but the decision to cast Michael Clarke Duncan in that role was excellent. And he's one of the better parts of that movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Like, what's wrong, Wesley?
Yeah. Yeah. He's one of the, or when he takes the mask off and he's like, the blind lawyer from Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. Yeah, I absolutely love that character. Also, shout out to Liev Schreiber, who does a great job in Into the Spider-Verse.
Yep.
As the main villain. And again, like there's so much there with like, his like love story with Vanessa. Yeah. And like I love that character. The only reason why he wasn't my number 1, because though I was really playing with them, was I did feel that if we're talking Spider-Man villains, I just felt that Green Goblin, there was more history there. And like I said, some of the, the iconic imagery of Gwen Stacy and things like that. So that was what inched it above, but my God, I could talk about Kingpin all day. So that's my number 2. And that rounds up my top 5. So that leaves you, my friend, to close us out.
Okay, number 1 for me, in my opinion, the most underrated, not Spider-Man villain, one of the most underrated villains in all of comic book lore, the Hobgoblin. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
He traditionally gets forgot because he came after the Green Goblin. So a lot of people look at the Hobgoblin like he's just sort of a Green Goblin impersonator, which to an extent he is.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I've always liked about Hobgoblin, and now there's been a few different versions of Hobgoblin over the years, and we'll talk about the Ned Leeds version in a second, but the OG Hobgoblin, Roderick Kingsley, they went years in the comic books without revealing his identity.
Right.
So with the Green Goblin, you have all this like family emotion and whatever, right?
Yeah.
And it's like the Osborns and they're close to Peter and all stuff. One of the things that made Heath Ledger's interpretation of the Joker and that sort of depiction of that character so scary is that you knew absolutely nothing about him.
Right.
And that is the direction that they went in with the Roderick Kingsley version of Hobgoblin, who was honestly a scarier, more sadistic version of the Green Goblin.
Yeah.
And sort of took he's kind of the Green Goblin on steroids.
Yeah.
In the first incarnation of him. Plus, I think he's got a way better look. The guy is voiced by Mark Hamill in the animated series.
Yeah.
The OG animated series. That is a character. We were talking earlier about what we hope to see in the next Spider-Man trilogy. Give me some Hobgoblin. Let's go and give me the scary Hobgoblin. Now, another version of the Hobgoblin later in the comics is Ned Leeds. And so I do think if we do end up, I could see them, quite honestly, because we're going to get Norman Osborn and Willem Dafoe returning in No Way Home.
Mm-hmm.
I could see them in this next trilogy kind of not doing a Green Goblin, because you'll get him in No Way Home and going straight to a Hobgoblin storyline where Ned becomes the Hobgoblin. I don't love that as much as the Roderick Kingsley version, because I think just having a villain that you know nothing about who just wants to watch the world burn is way scarier.
Yeah.
But
I just can't see Ned flying around on the glider, the guy that they've cast. I just can't.
No,
I can't see it.
But here's what I will say. I do think it will resonate more with the general audiences if they do go with the Ned Leeds version.
Sure. I think, so Hobgoblin, great choice. Didn't make my list. So but I as I was thinking through this, like, I definitely remember as a kid thinking that every time one of the episodes came on and he was like the villain, I was excited. So like that was definitely, I feel you on that, like, especially that animated series interpretation. I think what's tricky about the Hobgoblin, and we're kind of talking about it now, is like we've had this very PG version of Spider-Man in the MCU, and so that's what I was talking about at the beginning, like having to mature him up a little bit to face
you get around that, Kelly, by going with the Ned version.
But how silly is that? That's not the character you want to see.
No, it's not.
When
but
you're
I do think
about scariness and
that's not. And I do think like OG Hobgoblin fans probably share my view, but I do think if you're going to go with like a general audience, like, and want to attach some emotion to the character, they will go the Ned route and he will become, I can't even
imagine it.
Yeah. I can't see it either. Honestly, I can't see it either, but I do think that's the way they'll end up going. One of my favorite episodes of the OG animated series is the episode with the two goblins, because like they're not friends.
No.
Yes. So it's I love that character, and he's criminally underrated. Give me your honorable mentions.
Honorable mentions. Mysterio was in the conversation.
Anytime you can take a villain that has a fishbowl on his head and make him cool.
Yeah. Well, and I also, again, like I like that he's kind of an ordinary guy, but he's figured out a way to get past the Spidey sense and all that. So that was up there for me. This one was kind of cheating, but I just was I was toying with it. And then I'm like, no, that's cheating. As I was like, for defining villain as someone who antagonizes our hero, I was like, I'm going to maybe mention J. Jonah Jameson. So, he's, I know he's not, quite as much of a baddie as the rest of the folks that we've named on this list, but he certainly gives Spider-Man a fair bit of trouble. So those were some of the ones as well. Obviously, I thought about Shocker and things like that, but again, just none of them quite got to the list. Ones that, like, I think other people would think of that honestly are just not my favorite. Morbius, that's not my favorite.
Black Cat.
Yeah, that
even
also
she's kind of an anti-hero.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's very comparable.
Electro.
Yep. Scorpion. There's a ton of them.
Yeah.
But none of them quite hit that emotion that that my top 5 do. What about you?
My 3 quick honorable mentions are Mysterio. Like I said, anytime you can put a fishbowl on a guy's head and make him cool and believable, you get a shout out for me. Plus, I love
Jake Gyllenhaal did a great job.
Oh, it was fantastic. And also, but the way they wrote that character
Yeah.
was also fantastic.
Yeah.
Doc Ock, obviously, like I just want to reiterate, like just because he didn't make my top 5 does not mean in any way that I'm downplaying his significance.
Yeah.
And I again, just because I love the way he looks, Scorpion. I just love Scorpion, and I just love these two insects.
What we really needed was our favorite villains and then our favorite villain outfits.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll have to have an all fashion episode in the future because that's your favorite thing.
It is my favorite thing. Just if you got a cool suit, I like you. 100%.
So what you're saying is you wouldn't prioritize Rhino on your list then as a result?
Because that suit is ridiculous, especially the Paul Giamatti version. Oh my God.
Oh, I'm surprised that wasn't your number one.
No. And then there's other ones too, like Sandman. Like,
yeah,
Sandman is in the perfect role in this upcoming film because he's just kind of one of the guys. Like,
yeah.
Sandman as a main villain is like
I know it's so funny because every superhero there's a level of suspension of disbelief. Sandman just falls in the category for me, and like there's villains and heroes that have very similar powers that I'm much more willing to go there, go out on that limb and whatever. With him, I'm just like, really, it's a guy made out of sand.
Yeah, I know.
It's sandy. It's like
a sand man.
Just knock him over. Like it's not a character that I get excited about. So no, he wasn't in the conversation.
All right, Kelly. I think we're about done here this week. Hopefully we can reunite the triad next week.
I know. I mean, I'm starting to feel like, is it me? Like,
no, we just, so you know what? Sometimes this is why you do it with 3 people though, because if someone needs to sit out, we're not missing anything.
Thank God I'm here. That's all I'm going to say.
I find it very hard to believe that this will be the last time we're talking about Spider-Man in the upcoming weeks. Like, obviously, like we're guaranteed to do another episode reviewing the film.
Yeah.
So I'm very much looking forward to that. And
we got our tickets.
And I'm stoked. I'm honestly, the last time I was this excited to see a movie was probably Endgame.
Yeah, at least. I have to think about it, but it's especially during COVID, this one's a biggie.
100%. All right, that's going to do it for this week, everybody. Thanks so much for checking us out. If you like what you see, hit that like and subscribe button below. Also check us out on our Instagram at Talkin Pop. Spread the word, tell your friends. We really appreciate it. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye.